All right, young scholars, this week we are going to cover HTML tables. Within this week's lecture, we're going to discuss some review of the HTML basics from last week, introduce what headings, styles, fonts, text size, and alignment attributes are, and additionally, we'll heavily focus on creating tables and embedding images into them, which you'll have to do for your HTML team assignment. So here's a simple review from last week where we touched on HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It consists of tags and values, which can also have attributes. So styles, fonts, text size, and alignment are going to be attributes, just like we saw with size to the tag font last week. And we touched on the difference between static and dynamic websites. Here's the same example we provided last week, where tag is your font, or font is your tag, rather. The size is the attribute applied to font, and the +1 is the value assigned to that size. Test font is the text, and then we close out our font tag with /font. We touched on a number of these last week. Common HTML tags. HTML starts and ends the entire HTML body. Head, where most of our meta tags will go into. Body, which is basically where everything will go into. P for paragraph, UL for unordered list, OL for ordered list, LI for each of the list items to create them as bullets. href is our hyperlink reference, and image source helps us define an image where it is, which we will touch on a lot within this lesson. So I touched on HTML headers last week, but didn't really reference them. We have 6 different types. H1 is the largest, dropping down all the way to the 6th, and they keep getting smaller. So if you were to open your WYSIWYG, by default, it gives us the H1 heading. This is a heading. Notice how big it is here. If we were to change that to the H6 heading by simply changing our H1 open tag and H1 close tag to H6 and run that, notice how big a difference it is in size. So H1 gives us the biggest heading size. H6 gives us the smallest heading size. And 2, 3, 4, 5 are all in between and get incrementally smaller from H1. So these are what are called inline attributes for the header one and your paragraph. We're going to see these exclusively when we touch on cascading style sheets, or CSS, beginning on the 24th. These help us basically add color to our specific tags. So all we are doing here with our header one is we're now creating a style of color blue. That now means anything for this specific header, this is a heading, is now blue in color. In the simple example below it, this is now a paragraph. This is a paragraph that we've now applied the color red to this specific paragraph text. Now, when we use CSS, we can set it to where any paragraph text is red and any heading text is blue. In this example, it's just this specific inline, this line of code. And then for fonts, we can do the same thing. We can apply the font Verdana or Courier as a specific example. But again, this is inline. It's only applied to that specific line of code. When we get to CSS, you'll see that we can do it for entire sections or the entire HTML body code. Then we can do the same thing with our size. We can have a font size of 300%, 160%, which will just keep increasing the size. Then alignment, you could have it centered, left, right, depending on what you'd specifically like to do with your inline code. You can also set your HTML language. By default, I generally apply the EN for English. If you so choose, the link provided shows how to reference all of the available languages within the lang attribute to the HTML tag. So say you wanted it to be French, British, UK, you'd click that link to see what specific 2 or 3 letter code you'd have to apply there. So this is the bulk of what we are going to be working on today, using images. Our image source is defined as where the image is. Our alt is the description of that specific image. And then the width and height you can edit based on what your needs are. So we're going to do that for the tables to make sure that they look nice and even up. So images, just like any colors, can be used as the background. So the first bullet here is setting the entire background image using a URL as just a HTML code, inline HTML code. Whereas the rest of these bullets is CSS. So you start any CSS with the tag style and close it with the tag style. It does the same exact thing. But again, this is CSS code that you can put inside your HTML. This is simple HTML code. Of course, newer dynamic sites are more likely to use just a color scheme than a random image as a background. You're able to do the same thing, use that specific background image using CSS, and also set whether or not it repeats. In this example, we have a no repeat. It's not going to repeat. Otherwise, it might repeat over and over for as much as there is space on the specific website. So the rest of the lecture will focus on creating tables and embedding images in them, which is needed for completion of the HTML team assignment. It's usually the easiest way within an HTML file, assuming you're not understanding XML or JSON just yet, because we'll cover them next week. So here are the specific tags we're going to use for creating a table. One table has one table tag, but can have multiple headers, columns, and rows. And you'll notice here, table defines a table. TR, short for table row, defines a table. Should be in the table. But instead of table column, we have TD tag. TD is short for table data. So even though it's technically a column, it's TD, table data. And then lastly, TH tag helps us define a header. So again, as I just mentioned in review, the table tag defines an HTML table. It has to have at least one or more row, header, and table data or column element. So the table row tag has to contain one or more header or table data elements. Table data tag defines the standard data cell in an HTML table. That's why it's referred to as TD for table data instead of TC table column, like you might think due to TR for table row. And then lastly, that table header has specific elements applied to it. It's auto bolded and auto centered by default. You could change those if you so choose. However, that's going to be beyond the scope of what we're going to do here. So we're going to build an HTML file with a table. So we copy our code here to start off with and paste it in our WYSIWYG. Now we are going to add our header. We're adding a centered heading above the table you're about to create. So you'll notice we add that code here. Yep, we have two bodies. Okay, we have to delete the one. We have two titles and heads. We have to delete that. And now when we run that, we have a big heading 1, a line center that says your schedule, which is our code right here. You can set that and change that text to be our team schedule, whatever you so choose when you're doing the HTML team assignment. So here, the second and third bullet help us create our table. We're going to modify the border to show the rows and columns. So we copy the second and third bullet, and you'll notice we're going to put them in between the body tag in our WYSIWYG. So when we now run this, we don't see anything. That's because we do not have a border. So we change the border from 0 to 2, for example. And once we add our rows and columns, you'll see our table show. And that's now what we're doing here in our next slide. Within our table, we create a table row using the TR tag with a table header TH of course name with 4 columns as defined by TD. So you notice here our TR, we add header as course name, we have 4 columns due to the TD, 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 TD. We copy that and put that in our WYSIWYG in between table border and the close of the table tag. And now we run that and we see course name and 4 empty columns. They're empty because of this tag NBSP semicolon. Then next we add a row labeled instructor with 4 columns to match what we've previously done. And we pop that in right after course name. And we now see that that row is added. And then next we copy the other side to add number of credits. We pop that in, we run, and now all 3 of them are there. You'll notice that all 4 of them had to match, or all 3 of them rather had to match with 4 TDs, the columns. When you're doing your homework, if somebody has 5 courses, for example, you'd have to add an extra one of these for each. So in your example for your HTML assignment, you might have, instead of course name, group member name. And then instead of instructor, you might have course name there. And then instead of number of credits, you're going to embed an image that you feel reflects your course. So here's an example of the visual of that table we just created. And here's another through the WYSIWYG as I just showed you. So the size of the cells in each row is going to change based on whatever actual text or information you put in there. So the ampersand NBSP semicolon is just a placeholder, if you will. So as I just mentioned, if you have more than 4 courses, you're going to have to add another TD tag to all of the specific pieces. So the div tag simply is a division or divider within HTML code that you could use to break up different paragraphs in between the p tag. So we talked about this last week, where href is hyperlink reference and simply links us to a specific website using text. So we could have website link, links to websitelink.com, serves as a code for hyperlinking a website. So keep this in mind for now, but we're not going to use this until the PHP or forms lecture. That the form tag helps us define a form. The input tag with the type attribute helps us define a form input, and certain types are button, checkbox, file, hidden, image, password, radio, reset, submit, and text. So now we're going to create a gallery with 16 images that are going to be displayed. So we're going to copy this code in our WYSIWYG. So we pop this in our body section. Now we can get rid of this your schedule. And now we'll notice that we run it, nothing shows up. That's because we need to change the table border again. I'm going to change it to 2 from 0, and you'll now notice there are 4 blocks. But we're asked to do 16. We only have an example for 4. How do we get to 16? Well, we simply copy our TR tag through our TR tag, Control C, Control V to paste it once, then paste it twice, then paste it 3 times. And now when you run it, you now have 16 specific boxes. So you can search anywhere online for specific images that you want. When I previously did this example in other classes, I simply used baseball images, pictures of images, and pasted them into the table. However, you're more than welcome to search randomly for images to embed in this example, and as well for the HTML team assignment. So here's the current view of the table we just created. We're going to now have to embed images into those specific table cells. So here's how it looks. We're going to have our table data with the image source, and then whatever the URL of your picture is. So now for this first cell, I'm going to change that from TD and paste in that code I just provided. So now it shows up with that specific image of that base. So if you were to go Google, let's say sports, to find your image, you click this image, for example, you open image in new tab, and you copy this URL, and you'll put it in this path where image source equals quote and then end quote, and you'll save it, or paste it rather. What is this freezing on me? There we go. Okay. So now we run that and it gives us an error because apparently it doesn't like that image. So let's try this new image here. We copy the URL. We paste it in the image source. We run, and now that image comes up. Now that's a different image. It's not a baseball, so let's say we change the alt to sports. And you would go in and copy this same code for all 16 of your different table cells. So you would copy this highlighted code where the image source equals, inside quotes, whatever the URL is, space alt equals, in quotes, whatever you use to describe that. And then width equals, I just did 100 and 100 for width and height. This way, when you put all 16 in, it looks good. So here's an example of what that looked specifically with that one baseball picture. Here's the example of what I did years ago with the baseballs and 16 images. So that image source URL is going to be edited based on whatever specifically you decide to put, whatever picture you so choose. So I'm going to copy all of that into the first row just to show you how it looks. And you'll notice now all four of them have the same exact items. So what you're going to do for the HTML homework assignment is more along the lines of a combination of these two examples. You're going to take and create a table with, each group member's name, the course name, and then an image to describe them. So the first two rows will be like we just did in the previous example, and then an image to describe the specific course is going to be just like we just did here, where you're going to embed an image into that specific cell. So you may have questions regarding that, so you might pop in to the Zoom on Tuesday. That's perfectly fine. But of note, you don't need to use that alt tag if you don't want to. You can remove the table border once all 16 of the images are there. And you may have to use the same height for each of the images in order to accommodate fitting in the cells properly. So once you have all of these images in the cells, if you go back and change the table border to 0, you'll notice that now the border disappears and you just see the images. Now, if I can find it, I will paste an example I did of a previous fantasy football roster with all of the players embedded into a table, and I'll post that up onto Web Campus here. But that is all we have to cover for this week. Building tables within HTML. And next week, we will focus on more advanced topics in HTML. And again, if there are any questions, hop into the Zoom meeting on Tuesday. Thank you.